week 8 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few kickies. I have his sleeper options. This week, the first guy is Dustin Hopkins of the Los Angeles Chargers. So it was surprising to me last week that the Washington football team cut Hopkins. But right here, the Chargers were smart in my opinion, and they picked him up because Vizcaino just wasn't getting the job done this season. So this season, Hopkins, he's had a pretty decent year on the year with 49 fantasy points so far. And the last two games before Washington cut him, Week 5 he had 11 fantasy points, and Week 6 he had 9 fantasy points. So right here, Week 8 they versus the New England Patriots. The Patriots, I know, give up the 7th least amount of fantasy points to kickers, but Dustin Hopkins, he's got that long range. It's an indoor stadium type of game here for Hopkins and the Chargers. And I know he was shaky a couple times this season, but right here, it's a good pickup in my opinion. And he's on a high-powered offense that gets in the red zone a lot and scores a lot of touchdowns. So right now, Hopkins, he's available in 93% of fantasy leagues. But he's definitely a kicker that I think could be a good sleeper option this week. The second kick is Joey Sly of the San Francisco 49ers. So Robbie Gould, he's been banged up the last few weeks here. And Sly's filled in after he's bounced around the last few seasons around the league. So right here, Week 5, he had 5 fantasy points. Week 6, they had the bye. In Week 7 versus the Colts, he had 6 fantasy points. So right here, Week 8 at Chicago, I think he's going to have a decent amount of opportunities in this ball game at Soldier Field. I don't think the Chicago defense is going to give up many touchdowns to the San Francisco 49er team. And Joey Sly, we've seen in the past him have a good boot and kick 50-plus yarders. And last week, that was the case as well. He missed an extra point, but hit a 52-yarder in that ball game. So right here, I think San Francisco will be in the red zone a decent amount in this game. But there's going to be many drives, in my opinion, where they don't finish him off with a touchdown. So I think Sly in this game could get anywhere from 5 to 10 fantasy points. And I think he's definitely a sleeper option at the kicker position, available in 87% of fantasy leagues. And the third and final kicker I have as a sleeper this week, Zane Gonzalez of the Carolina Panthers. So Zane Gonzalez, he's been pretty decent this season with his new team in Carolina. The last 3 weeks for him, Week 5 versus Philly, 14 fantasy points. Week 6 versus the Minnesota Vikings, 9 fantasy points. And Week 7 at the Giants, 4 fantasy points. So this week, they versus an Atlanta Falcon team that, let's be honest, their defense isn't all that great, and they do give up a decent amount of points to teams. So right here, this ball game's in Atlanta. It's indoors. I think we're going to see a mini shootout between these two division rivals, and we're going to see some defensive plays too on both sides of the football as well, in my opinion. So I think in this ball game, Zane Gonzalez could score anywhere from 7 to 10 fantasy points, and he's available in 97% of fantasy leagues. So that's a few kickers I have as sleeper options for Week 8 of the fantasy football season.